Hi, my name is Matthew and welcome to Writing Today. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about writing short stories and how you can make them have some impact on the reader. And speaking of scary stories, I've started a second channel called the Aurora Files, where I'm reading scary short stories from the internet, from classic novels, as well as my own scary short stories for you to enjoy. And to promote the start of this new channel, I am doing a giveaway of a Kindle Paperwhite. In order to enter this giveaway, you need only subscribe to the channel. There's a link at the top of the description to lead you there. And if you want to increase your chances of winning, you can share this giveaway on your social media, giving you bonus entries and increasing your chances of winning. With that said, let's discuss writing short stories and how you can use this shorter writing format to create a story with impact. First, let us talk about the power of concise writing. Now, whenever you are writing a full novel, you tend to stick with the most important elements of the story first, and once the first draft is written, then you write the second draft where you add and explore deeper meanings, you add more details, you add better descriptions to the story. With short stories, you only have a few thousand words to get your point across, and that means you need to establish a world space, you need to establish a plot, your characters, and you need to have a beginning and resolution to your story as well. And for some writers, this is a tall order, so that's why a lot of them like to write a series of short stories, which can easily be stretched out into a full novel, but that's by the by. But that's the beauty of concise writing. It challenges you, it forces you to focus on what's important in your story, and make sure you hammer those elements home. A lot of beginner writers, as well as experienced authors, like to build upon things. They like to create a big foundation. But there isn't that much time in a short story to do that. So you need to trust in your own instincts as a writer to find the core elements of your story, and at the same time, you need to trust in the imagination of the reader to fill in the gaps. Now, step 2 is identifying the core themes and elements in your story. And this means skipping out on a lot of the description that you would usually add when building your plots. And this is a great way to bring things down to their simplest form, because we are often starting our novels with so many grand ideas. We even have a few ideas of some later scenes, even though we haven't established the basics just yet. So coming back down to the basics, you need to establish what is the genre, what is the theme of your story. Is it a scary story? Is it a romance? Is it a comedy? You need to figure this out before you start writing it, because this can affect your writing style. Remember, you don't have that much room. So you can't write a short story about something scary or ridiculous if you have a fantasy writer's mindset. You might overdo it with the description and the writing style doesn't match the theme. Once more, you bring it down to the basics. You establish that theme and then you establish the writing style that you're going to use. What is the emotion that you want to elicit from the reader? So right now you might be thinking, yes, I want the reader to be scared, or I want them to have a laugh. But can finding the emotion really help me figure out the important elements in the story? Yes, it can. This is one of the rare times where you focus on creating the characters later as well as the plot, and instead focus on the emotion first. Often we like to think about the details first before we think about the emotions. We try to use the details, the elements of the story to convey an emotion, instead of helping the emotion help us figure out the details. This is a short story. We're not going to be dealing with these characters and elements for a long time. What we are trying to do is get an emotional reaction from the reader in that short space. So when it comes to writing a short story, think about the impact you want to leave rather than the details you want to convey. Step 3 is making your characters memorable. Now, when writing a novel, there's a lot of techniques that we use to make sure a character is memorable, and we usually draw them out over the novel. We don't want a character to really shine at some point and then just feel useless throughout the novel, or worse, throughout the series. One of the techniques that writers like to employ is creating a hollow character for the reader to place themselves into. This is a character that will make the most obvious and common sense decisions. So these characters do feel kind of bland, but at the same time not so bland, because the reader is putting themselves in that character's shoes, making the main character really come to life. Your reader is not going to do that with the short story that you have presented. You have a short opportunity here to present a memorable character, which means you can skip all of the build-up and you can focus on making sure your main character has impact. Try to make a scene that makes them shine, makes them stand out. If you are writing a comedy, give your main character the lines that make the story a lot more funny. For example, you can make sure they say all of the witty remarks, or they can play the straight man, which complements the witty remarks from your other characters. If you want to make sure that your short story has an impact and evokes an emotion, you've got to make sure your characters have an impact as well. Don't make your main characters bystanders in a situation which you find interesting for the reader. Instead, make sure that character is present, that they play a part that is important. An impactful character will help you create an impactful short story. Step 4 is using tension and conflict. Okay, you have your emotions, you have your core elements, you have your impactful character. But what is your plot? Well, the plot is a bit more difficult to establish. You might be strapped for ideas, so here's a hint to create a story quickly and easily. Conflict. Conflict is the number one way you can create a story. Think about a clash of two ideas, or two people, or two beings. Whatever it may be, this clash is interesting. There's a reason a protagonist has an antagonist. There's a reason a protagonist struggles in every story. Conflicts are interesting. And now you don't have to prolong them into a whole novel. You can have a resolution by the end. And you could find conflict in every genre. If it's a romance, the conflict is two characters finding a way to connect with each other. If it is a comedy, your characters are in a situation and they're trying to figure it out, and there are a lot of hijinks and funny scenes along the way. And of course, for your thrillers and action adventures, you've got a protagonist and antagonist. It could be a cat and mouse chase story, where the protagonist is running away from some evil creature, or it could be an action adventure, where you have your protagonist fighting against the villain. So think of the conflicts that are often commonplace in the theme you have chosen, and try to use that as inspiration to create your own. Calling back to the second point, your writing style is also going to be affected by this decision. For example, you could be writing a thriller where you have some conflict between a protagonist and antagonist, and this can happen many different ways. For example, if these two elements are clashing head on, then what you have is something that's a bit more high-paced, and that's going to affect your writing. But if it is a cat and mouse chase scene, where you have the protagonist running and hiding away from the antagonist, you're going to slow your pacing down to build up tension. So that's why I've added tension and conflict into one point here, because once you have chosen your conflict, you need to decide the level of tension in your story as well, and this will dictate the pacing of your writing style. The final point is simply creating a conclusion that resonates with the reader. Now don't think too much about this. A lot of writers get really scared when the resolution of a short story comes along, because what they want to do is make sure that all the impact is in that ending. They want to convey a moral message perhaps. And while this is okay, there's nothing wrong with it, a lot of them overdo it with the tension that they create, too much emphasis on it. And as a result, it kind of just comes off as forced. So when it comes to writing short stories, I often recommend sticking with your instincts and writing on gut feeling alone. You've established a lot of important elements so far, but once more you're getting too bogged down into the details, and that will actually spoil your final message. Notice throughout these tips, I haven't told you once to use details to your advantage. You're trying to convey a lot of core elements at once and tell a cohesive and interesting story. But the moment you get bogged down into the details, you'll interrupt your pacing, your writing style. What you're trying to do is use a mentality you would use to write a novel to write a short story, and that will only detract from the impact. And here's the thing, most endings to short stories aren't going to be that super. It's not like you've been on a long journey with these characters. It's not like you've stuck around with them, you've truly felt that you were in their place the whole time. These are characters that your reader will only know for probably half an hour at most. So simply devise a resolution that fits your story and characters, and then try to make sure you write it in the same way that you write everything else. Don't overemphasize it and don't underemphasize it. And there you have it, 5 tips to help you get started in writing your impactful short stories. Now, having written a few hundred short stories myself, I can tell you that not all short stories will be a hit. There are some short stories where you just don't feel it, the story doesn't click, and you stick around with the characters long enough to write the story, but at the end of the day, you're glad to say goodbye to them and start something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. A short story is a great way to test out an idea, to test your writing skills, so at the end of the day you still win. So leaving the professional advice for now, I'm going to give you some personal advice. and that's to write as many short stories as you can. Enjoy the experience, try to have fun, and also shoot for variety. You don't want to stick with one theme all the time. Short stories are a great way to experiment with different ideas, to try different styles, something you don't want to fully commit to with a full novel, but certainly you want to try out and improve upon. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Writing Today. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are interested in winning that Kindle Paperwhite, then be sure to enter my giveaway at the top of the description. And if you're interested in listening to some scary short stories, I recommend checking out the Aurora Files as well. There are plenty of great stories I've read, some that have truly impressed me and inspired me, and they can do the same for you. With that, thank you for watching, good day, good night, and happy writing.